TIFU, went in for a job interview and asked to eat lunch in the office instead of going out. Was told that was why they weren't going to hire me, by user crazy 2 killer. Looking for a job, had a recruiter hit me up about a good fit. My wife is pregnant and 2 weeks from her due date, not sure if it's a good time to switch, but always keeping my options open. Zoom interviewed with a company once for 2 hours. They liked me so much they flew me to their HQ to meet the team. Essentially I was as good as hired. The flight in was rough as hell, with the person in front having their seat down and my knees getting gripped by metal while we bounced around in the air. After 4 hours we landed and I went right to the hotel room to sleep. Woke up the next morning, went into the office and started meeting with the team. The CEO says they had a schedule laid out with me to meet the entire team and asked if there was anything they could do to accommodate me. I saw on the schedule that it said go out for lunch. My knees still hurting from the flight, I spoke up and said, "Is there any way we can do a meet and eat here in the office?" He said I guess with a confused look on his face, then excused himself and exited. The CFO followed suit and left while I remained behind with a revolving door of team members coming in to talk with me. Closer to lunch the CEO stops back in and says, "I really think you need to take the team out to lunch, it will be good for you to bond." I instantly replied, "Okay, that works for me." Went to lunch, came back, kept doing interviews. CFO comes in at the end and says, "We appreciate your time and thank you for coming in, but we are going to pass on you and look at other candidates. We already called you an Uber which is here, please follow me." Traveled back home after spending the rest of that day at the airport. Thank God for Delta Sky Lounge, red eye back, got home at 6 am, went to bed. Recruiter calls at 10 am and says I have feedback on the interview. Apparently there was some issue about lunch and they felt offended. I explained what happened and said to the recruiter, "You were great to work with, please call me if another position comes up." Dr. Went to a job interview, asked if we could eat lunch in the office, not go out. CEO took offense to the accommodation request and the recruiter said that was why I didn't get the job. I've read all the comments so far. Best comment, "I snatched defeat from the jaws of victory." Reminder, this sub is today IFD up. Acknowledged at the time of posting. You can choose to dogpile, and if this makes you feel better about your day, your choices, or your situation, then it was worth it. No one is perfect, no one is 100% right all the time, and we all, hopefully, learn from our mistakes. You can learn from mine. Wow! This post has plus 6.5 million views and is about to hit the front page. Well done! Digital cookies for everyone. Who knew Redditors were such proponents of lunch? P.S. Yes, I have a YT channel, not sure what that has to do with anything, other than give a face to the post. TIFU by cleaning my windowsill braless, by Useroth, that's just a lie. For context, I'm Irish and we've recently had big historic storm. There wasn't too much damage done to my home, mainly the garden and a few roof tiles off, but on the grand scale, not bad. However, I did leave a kitchen window open on a latch. The window didn't break, but it did leave a mess inside my kitchen around my window inside, the sink and the blind. My ma and da's house had the power cut. So obviously I'd invited them to stay. They said they'd be at my house in around 2 hours. My ma, God bless her wee soul, is a bit of a clean freak. So naturally, my ADHD self shot straight into hyperfocus. The ADHD ERS will understand this. Because of the storm, the contents of the wood chip and mud from the garden were inside my kitchen by the windowsill, all over my blinds and sink. So I chose to get right into washing inside the kitchen cupboards and the ice cube trays inside the freezer in true ADHD style. Scrub the floor, Armageddon style, where bacteria wouldn't survive. The anxiety really started to kick in, so I took some oil that I'm prescribed. 2 ml, 30 mg THC. Usually takes an hour or so to kick in. But I'd forgotten to eat, but nah, feck it. So anyway, I take a break and doom scroll and notice the time. Jesus, Mary and the wee donkey, half an hour before my parents get here. Better finish cleaning. So I get to the windowsill, so muddy, and some plants that sat on the ledge had been blown over. These plants were all cactus. Particularly a bunny ear cactus plant that I'm particularly fond of. So I moved them off the windowsill on the draining part of the sink and sorted the soil just as the oil started to hit me. Now this is key, I was in old clothes, hair up, braless. The ladies will know, this is classic deep clean attire. I start wiping the ledge, high as a fucking kite. Now this might sound like a humble brag, but I'm rather well endowed on the knocker's front. The chariots were swinging slow. And my sweet bunny ear cactus was being smothered, particularly by my right tit as I was leaning over them to clean the windowsill. The pain didn't even kick in right away. I'd cleaned the windowsill, blind and even sprayed air freshener. It wasn't till I went to get changed and took my t-shirt off that I felt the burn of 1,000 fucking suns. When I took my top off, I'm not joking when I say it looked like the cast of Honey I Shrunk the Kids had went to war with my tits using tiny spears. It looked like tiny blonde hairs covered my right tit. It looked like my right tit was going through menopause. It was hot, red, and had tiny hairs all over. The pain really started to kick in. I turned my bathroom upside down looking for tweezers. I found them just as I heard someone walk in my door. My parents had arrived. My face was purple, tears in my eyes. My ma knew something was wrong. My dad was clueless. His first words upon seeing me and the damage from the storm was "had more wind up my arse." Charming. I had to fess up to my ma. I told her, "I've hurt my tit, there's cactus pricks all over my tit." She laughed and said, "Excuse me." So I showed her. The gasp on horror on her face, I swear you'd have thought I'd spat on my granny's grave. She starts inspecting, pulls her phone out to use the torch. Obviously she's old, so it takes her 2 business days to turn on the torch of her 2014 Samsung Galaxy. I stand at the top of my stairs with one tit out. She looks and tells me she has a solution. A microfiber cloth. Something she's seen on TikTok. Suddenly, I got a case of the giggles, in pain but fucking pissing myself at this idea. She gets the cloth, proceeds to rub it over my tit to grab the small pricks out. It worked, excruciating but it worked. But my ma, it doesn't stop there. We need to now cool our tit down because it looks raging red. You'd think some ice, frozen peas, or even some cooled cabbage leaves. No, not my ma. Holy water, God bless our tit. I'll give her due. She also recommended cabbage later on. The whole time my father is sat on my sofa, watching the news. He walked into my kitchen and shouts upstairs. "What the fuck have you done?" Me, just as the THC reached its peak, runs downstairs with my ma. We go into the kitchen where my da is. He's holding onto my very expensive Roman blind. With white spots all over it, I'd cleaned it with bleach while I was obviously melted on the THC. While I stood there, still braless, with my t-shirt up holding my right tit, exposed. Anyway, we had a steak pie and potatoes for dinner. It was grand. My father looked at the steak pie in the eye more than I. TLDR. I cleaned my kitchen, invited parents for dinner, got high and damaged my tit leaning over a cactus, which was soothed with holy water from my mother, and then proceeded to flash my father, had a nice but awkward steak pie dinner afterwards. TIFU by not going to the doctor for my heartburn. By user sylph_co. Over the past year, I began experiencing pain. It felt like the center of my chest was on fire. Due to the burning sensation and the location, I assumed that it must be what heartburn felt like. I'm in my mid-20s now. My parents always have Tums on hand, and my best friend often complains of it, so I assumed that it was something that happened with age. I went to the store and bought some antacid chews and pills, and was sure to keep them on hand. If I had something I knew could trigger it, like Chinese food, I would be sure to take some before I went to bed. At first, the chews seemed to help. If I woke up with heartburn, I would take some and sit in an upright position until the pain went away. But after a while, it began to seem like it wasn't really helping. I also noticed it tended to happen in bursts. If I had heartburn, I knew I would be more likely to have it again the next day, so I was careful with food. However, I could go months without having it at all. Last week, I woke up and felt a bit of discomfort coming on. I took a tablet and went back to sleep. I woke up an hour later in a lot of pain. I took more chews. I ate saltines. I sat in an upright position. Nothing was helping. It was bad enough that honestly I couldn't even sit still. I realized at that point that heartburn probably was not meant to hurt this much, but honestly I wasn't really thinking at all anymore. It was becoming agony, and all I wanted was the pain to stop. I thankfully actually only live a few minutes away from a hospital, so I drove myself over. It was around 5 in the morning and empty. I told them that it just hurt really bad in the center of my chest, and they got me back right away. At this point the pain was very bad. I was rating it at an 8 out of 10, I was worried I was being dramatic, and I began throwing up. As they were tending to me, they asked, "Do you have a family history of gallbladder issues?" Oh my god! Yes. My sister had hers out a few years ago, my mom had hers out, my aunt had hers out, and my grandma on that side had hers out too. How did I not think of that? They gave me a bunch of meds, then took me to ultrasound, and yep. Gallstones, and actually stones stuck in the neck that would not clear, which is why the pain wouldn't stop. A surgeon soon was in to talk to me and told me that while they can't tell for sure based on the ultrasound, it was possible I had cholecystitis. He said my gallbladder had to come out no matter what, but that possible diagnoses only increased the urgency of when. I told him I just wanted to get this over with, and a few hours later, I was in my first ever surgery. It was confirmed during the surgery that I indeed had cholecystitis. I spent the night in the hospital for the very first time too. Did you know you can order chocolate shakes at 7 a.m? It's been a week now and recovery is going well. I'm happy that I'm never going to experience that horrible heartburn ever again. But I'm also kicking myself for having gallstone attacks for a year without realizing it. I won't ever ignore health issues like that ever again. TLDR, the heartburn I had been experiencing for the past year was gallstone attacks the entire time. TIFU, by staring at a client during a couples massage, by user select addition 7188. I'm a registered massage therapist, RMT. Often during treatments, especially when using Swedish techniques, I tend to visually zone out. I find it easier to focus on what I'm doing with my eyes closed to just staring into space. Just work by feel, you know? Today another RMT and myself were booked for a couples massage. My client was female and my coworker had her male partner. Now, today I'm more tired than usual. It was a very gusty night and the wind howling kept waking me up. So as I'm working in the warm, quiet, and dimly lit room, anytime I close my eyes I can feel my body wanting to doze off. In these types of situations, a couple coworkers and myself will start doing facial exercises to try and keep ourselves awake without disturbing the client or taking away from their experience. Think like, super wide eyes, clenching and unclenching jaw, furrowing and unfurrowing brows, puffing up cheeks and sucking them in, etc. It's weird, and it looks weird, but it does help and usually no one knows unless there's another RMT in the room. So I'm making these weird faces to try and keep myself awake and on task, and the appointment is going as normal. The other RMT has their client turn, puts their eye mask on, I have my client turn over and give them an eye mask and and I continue my face exercises. At some point, I'm away in my head somewhere while working away and not paying attention to what I'm actually staring at while continuing to make these stupid dumb faces, when suddenly I zone back in and notice my coworker's client staring back at me with a very disturbed expression. My coworker had removed their eye mask because it kept sliding off, and I hadn't noticed. I had been seemingly intently staring at this poor guy, making bizarre faces for at least several minutes at this point. He didn't say anything, so I swiftly broke eye contact and tried to avoid looking his way again for the rest of the session. I basically ran from the room after the appointment ended. Just feeling mortified by this. And if that client happens to stumble upon this, I'm sorry for making it weird. Thanks for not complaining about my weird staring. TLDR, today I effed up by zoning out and absent-mindedly staring at a client during a couples massage while doing facial exercises to stay awake. Update, they rebooked. Just letting y'all know, looks like it went over as best as it could have. After that appointment, I had quickly let my boss know what had happened before I had to jump into my next appointment. She, like many of you, enjoyed a good laugh at my expense. The couple hung out in our lounge and sauna for some time after, and at some point then, as I was informed at the end of my day, my boss checked in on them to see how they enjoyed the amenities and service. They seemed to be enjoying everything and didn't mention anything about my weird faces at that point, so she didn't bring it up. When they went to pay, they left generous tips for my coworker and myself. A few hours later, the guy called back and asked to rebook. Specifically asking for the girl with the funny focus face to work on him this time. Apparently, his girlfriend told him it was a really good massage, so he wants to give me a go next round. Funny faces and all. They'll be back in a couple of weeks. So, I suppose while I felt like I'd royally fucked up in the moment, it sorta worked out in the end. TIFU, by letting my kids watch Bluey, by user Shenanigamer. Obligatory not literally today disclaimer but technically over a year ago culminating in the fuck up a couple of days ago. I know what you're thinking, how could anyone fuck up by letting their kids watch the absolutely adorable and beloved animated show about a family of Australian dogs? Please allow me to enlighten you. My wife and I have 5-year-old triplet boys. As some of you with kids can probably understand, discovering Bluey a year or so ago became a godsend when you just need a break for a few minutes. Having triplets, we probably rely on those breaks more than a lot of people would recommend, but a lot of people don't have triplets either. For those of you not that familiar with Bluey, a majority of the episodes are about some silly game unique to the Healer family. The fourth episode, Daddy Robot, is about the kids asking their dad to play Daddy Robot. Daddy Robot is where the dad basically pretends to be the robot servant for the two children. He does what they ask and refers to them as his master. Fast forward to a couple days ago, after around a year or so of watching all the Bluey episodes multiple times. My 3 5-year-old boys were playing Daddy Robot at school amongst themselves. What were they asking Daddy Robot to do? I'll tell you what they were asking Daddy Robot to do. Being 5-year-old boys, anything to do with butts is obviously the pinnacle of comedy. So if you were trying to be silly and make your brothers laugh, why would you not ask your Daddy Robot to put their face between your butt cheeks? Now, place yourselves in the shoes of someone who works with kids, is a mandatory reporter for any kind of suspected child abuse, but you are not familiar enough with Bluey to immediately recognize the phrase Daddy Robot. Not only do you hear a 5-year-old ask another 5-year-old from the same family to put their face between their butt cheeks, but the Daddy Robot then proceeds to respond with "Yes, Master." What do you think happens next? You guessed it. Earlier in the week, a social worker, escorted by a state trooper, was in our house for 2 to 3 hours asking questions and checking on our living conditions. Thankfully, Bluey was playing almost the entire time. It wasn't until yesterday that my wife spoke to a detective to get the barest of details to realize they were reenacting an episode of Bluey and not, in fact, reenacting some sort of sexual master/slave dynamic from home. The investigation is still proceeding with individual interviews next month, so now I have to worry about getting arrested in a month if my kids can't explain Daddy Robot properly. TLDR encouraged my kids to watch Bluey. They played a game from Bluey that sounds like abuse is going on at home outside of context, and now being investigated by CPS as a precaution.